Hello everybody, my name is Neil with Portal To Ascension. Welcome back to Portal To Ascension. I'm excited today because one of my favorite topics, well definitely UFOs and ETs in general, but I like to get really grounded and practical with the awareness, and it's not that we need to just think that, oh yeah, they could exist. Well, it's such a big universe, chances are we're not the only ones in it. You know, these are kind of like abstract concepts on the possibility that, you know, we're not alone. But I feel that there's enough information and evidence out there that suggests that there is something going on in the universe. There's all types of anomalies that have been discovered on different planets. There's even anomalies that have been found in the far depths of space in other solar systems, right? And not to go off on too much of a tangent, but even a few years ago, there was scientists were saying that there was some sort of structure in front of a star, and the way it was reflecting light seemed like it was a metallic object, and the way the sunlight was pulsating looked like this thing was rotating around the sun, therefore maybe even ciphering energy, like some sort of device ciphering energy from the sun from an advanced civilization. This was on mainstream news, and they were using whatever light spectrum frequencies to really see what kind of material that this object was, and they said it was some type of metallic object. These types of things come and they get swept under the rug, and so what I'm getting at here is that there's a lot of information that is out there just from a little bit of research. You can stop going from the possibility of, I think that we're not alone in the universe, it's a big universe, to more of the grounded reality that there is enough evidence out there to at least make you wonder what is really going on, who are we, and what is this universe. So I'm really excited today because we're in Glastonbury and we have the Portal To Ascension conference starting tomorrow, and I'm here with one of our speakers and guests, Ananda Sirisena, and he has written some amazing books, so we're going to get into it. But before we get into the conversation, I just kind of want to show you some of the books here. I think we have 5 books here, and one of them, the first one is Massive Vimana UFO over Atomic Weapons Establishment, right? And we'll talk about what Vimanas are in a second. Something Strange on the Lunar Surface, okay? The Mount Configuration in Sidonia, which is Mars, and this is probably the Mars Anomaly book. We have Flying Saucers Land in Sri Lanka, and something that's really cool, hopefully we'll get into this today, Other Worlds and Buddhism, what Buddhism says about other worlds. So this kind of takes it into the next level of the esoterics and the metaphysics, I would think. So Ananda, thank you for being here, brother. It's good to see you.
Thank you. Well, I'm really happy to have this interview with you, Neil.
How many sightings or anomalies do you think that have been discovered on Mars?
Well, they fall into 2 categories. There's the photographs that were taken starting in 1976 when the Viking landers and probes went there, and just prior to that the Mariner 9, which took some photographs of Mars, and then to the recent robotic endeavours. So we had the Curiosity rover and so on that actually landed and started scratching around the surface of Mars. So in between those 2 events of the 1976 and the 2016 time frame, there are literally thousands and thousands of photographs,
right,
and many of them show very strange things on the planet Mars, which we have to get our heads around. Now it's not like saying, oh, there's something there that looks like a fish bone. It's not as simple as that, because appearances can be deceptive. So it's a question of investigating further to try and analyze what's actually on the surface of Mars. So I'll be going into that. That's one part of it. The other part is what the rovers have discovered by the way of very close-up photographs of the rocks. In the rocks, there's fossils, without a doubt. So we need to look at some of those and try and identify what types of fossils there might be compared to life on Earth. Remember, we're talking about a distant planet, well, the nearest planet to us.
Right. So if this has been, if there's that many images and we've found so many anomalies, how come regular people that just are seeing the images aren't discovering this?
Well, it's interesting that in one sense NASA doesn't want you to believe that there is some kind of life on Mars.
Yeah.
Although the evidence for that is extremely strong, as I will show you tomorrow. So if they don't want officially you or me or anyone else in the world or even the scientific community to believe that, that suggests there's something going on at top level. Even the scientists who work for NASA are discouraged from talking about life on Mars. Any discoveries they make, they have to regard in terms of rocks and geology and chemical signatures and so on, rather than look at the question of life on Mars. But that question of life on Mars is very important because our two planets are the closest planets together, and if there was, or if there is some life on Mars today, that's going to be very important for humanity.
Right. So in other words, they kind of are gaslighting us in some way. But when it comes to, for example, when there are certain anomalies and you start being curious about it, and then they say, well, no, this is really what it is. But you look at this anomaly and you can tell that it looks like something other than the ordinary. And they may say it's a refracting of the light, something like that.
They generally have some explanation, some excuse. They might say, oh, that's nothing other than a chemical reaction, when they did the tests for life way back in 1976. But we can show that these were not incidental. The results were very positive, without a doubt. And I'll explain the three basic experiments that were done in 1976 on the surface of Mars, two places 4,000 miles apart, and they got the same results.
And was that microbes?
Microbes, without a doubt. Microbial life on Mars has been proven since 1976, and yet NASA wants to sweep all those data under the rug. Why? It's a very good question. Why are they doing this? We don't really know the answer. One might say, well, ask NASA.
Yeah.
And NASA will probably say, well, we don't have incontrovertible evidence of life outside of Earth, as yet. And they'll always say, as yet. And that as yet has been going on for 40 years now.
Yeah. And that opens up a whole other question. Like, if there's life there, did life start there and then come here? Did it eventually go there? Is it the beginning of life, or is it the devolution of life?
Well, this is, now you mentioned evolution, there's evolution.
Right.
So this is the dilemma for scientists. If they accept that there's microbial life on Mars, and they believe in evolution, then they've got to accept that the microbial life might have become more complex life forms. Maybe eventually plants and animals, and then the question of humanoid life forms. That is frightening for some of these scientists, because some of them have been brought up with the feeling that there is life only on Earth and nowhere else. But that's an assumption, and it's as easy and as quick to change that assumption to maybe there is life out there. Let's find the evidence for it, rather than assume there is no life.
Yeah.
Which is a wrong assumption.
And I guess we don't want to speculate too much, but why do they want to assume there's no life rather than there is? Could it be like a power thing where if we start realizing we're not alone in the universe, the power structures through collapse?
That's partly that. There's also part of the problem is the clinging to medieval religious concepts, if you like, or beliefs, some of which have said that we're alone in the universe. Well, clearly we're not alone in the universe, because that is statistically impossible. On a statistical basis, the universe must be teeming with life. Not just in this galaxy, but the other billions of galaxies out there. But our galaxy is a huge place. And then they bring the argument, well, it's too far for them to come from the other stars. We don't need to go to the other stars. We can go just to the planets in this solar system and discover what's already been discovered, already been taken in the way of photographs and other evidence, such as scientific experiments.
Right. And I mean, on your presentation, you're going to go over some of these anomalies. We'll talk about a couple of them, because it'll take probably a whole hour just to go over a few of them, right? But would you say that there's also evidence that there's life on other planets in our solar system as well?
Yes, I think so. At the moment, we only have photographic evidence from Mercury, Venus, and Mars.
Yeah.
Of those, the strongest information comes from Mars.
Yeah.
We're still studying Venus, we're still studying Mercury. I would probably say that Mercury might be out of the question because it's so close to the Sun and it's extremely hot. Some people might argue that Venus is hot as well, but it's only a few years ago we discovered phosphine in the atmosphere of Venus. So that is evidence of life.
Right. Which can only be created through the decay of organic matter, if not created through industrial ways. So either organic matter is decaying, or someone is there creating it. Right?
Indeed, those are the two
Right.
strong
But
possibilities.
the interesting part to speak about that is the area in Venus's atmosphere they discovered it is 75 to 80 degrees Fahrenheit. It's like in a place where it's like the perfect weather
Indeed,
for life
there
to be
is.
created.
So, like they talk about the Goldilocks
Yeah.
and the porridge, not too hot, not too cold.
Yeah.
Even in an atmosphere
You have that,
such
yeah.
as Venus, you have that.
We have it in
on Earth.
our atmosphere. It's freezing up there.
You go straight up to the ionosphere, there's various gradations of
Yeah.
temperature. So, and sometimes it gets very cold and gets hot again and cold again.
Right.
So different layers of the atmosphere until we get into the interstellar space. So there's a lot, we don't know everything, and there are some scientists who believe they know everything, but they don't really. And then we know, for example, I'm the current president of SPSR, the Society for Planetary SETI Research, where SETI is the search for extraterrestrial intelligence. So SPSR is looking at the surface of the Moon and Mars to really figure out what's been discovered and what's going on, and why this reluctance to accept the fact that we have discovered microbial life on Mars already,
Yeah.
way back in 1976.
Right. And had they, at this point, because there was other discoveries after that, where they said microbial life in the poles, right?
Yes.
Have they come up with a consensus now that life has been discovered, or is it still kind of...
No, the consensus is still, we're searching, we're still looking.
Yeah.
There is no incontrovertible evidence. You have to understand that in science you have evidence on one side of things, and then you use that evidence to provide the proof.
Yeah.
So what they're saying is the proof is not in yet. There may be bits and pieces of evidence, but we need to remain open-minded and look at the evidence and say, well, could there be alternative explanations for this or not? And we can get into some deeper aspects of this, some of these discoveries on Mars, which I will cover tomorrow. as
Yeah.
well.
And I mean, so interesting from what I've heard from you, and also from other people that spoke about Mars, and even Richard Hoagland, who
Yes.
was one of the, I guess, one of the pioneers, I would say, because he's been doing it for a while, is that it's pretty obvious that there are structures there on Mars, and some of them are just not even subtle objects, but gross objects, where you can be like, what is this? So just by visiting that planet, they must have discovered quite a lot, right?
Yes. Well, to be fair, we believe that we haven't sent people to Mars as yet.
Yeah.
And that's in the plans.
Yes,
What
exactly.
we sent, sensors, cameras, rovers,
Right.
which are doing a lot of good science
Yeah.
on the part of NASA.
I want to talk about just two anomalies, and then we'll get into other topics. But first, I want to ask you: did you hear about the one a year or two ago where they said they found the door in the rock in
I'm
Mars?
going to show that picture
Right, okay.
tomorrow.
And then, so it was all in the news, like, oh my god, door discovered. And then they said, oh no, it was like that big or something like that. Which is interesting because we, as the layman, have no way of actually knowing what size it is. So we just have to take what they took and told us, But it looked like a carved out, perfectly right angled door.
Yes. Admittedly, that is small. I don't think it's more than 2 feet in total height. But nevertheless, it looks like a cave entrance.
Yeah.
But as I said earlier, sometimes appearances can be deceptive. So you've got to be careful when you draw a conclusion by looking at something. At first sight, it may not be exactly what it looks like.
Yeah.
So you need further research.
Right.
Sure. So that's one of the pictures I will be showing tomorrow.
Okay.
And several others, including the mound configuration. Now this is
That's the face?
Well, near where the face is are several small mounds. When I say small, these mounds are about twice the size of the largest pyramid in Egypt, the Giza pyramid. So we're talking about mounds that are fairly large, not very small stones or rocks or boulders, but mounds that look like eroded pyramids, and may well be the case, but they've been laid out in a precise mathematical configuration, and that configuration was analyzed by late professor of physics, Dr. Horace Crater, who was professor and taught physics at the University of Tennessee Space Institute for 40 years. Sadly, he passed away in 2017, but not before he had done a thorough analysis of that mound layout and published a paper on it. Now this mound layout is suggestive of a template for a pyramid. So my talk is titled Pyramids on Mars. We need to understand what's been going on there. There are several areas of Mars which are quite intriguing, quite interesting, and the whole question of was Mars Earth-like way back in the past, maybe millions, maybe even billions of years ago. Mars may have had a warm climate, had rainfall and water and levels of oxygen which could have supported life. But today it's cold. There is hardly any oxygen in the atmosphere. There's no flowing water on the surface, but there's ample evidence of lakes and rivers and valleys and so forth.
Right, right. You know, I've seen some images of pictures that we've been given of Mars and the surface from all those decades that we've been, and you would see different color gradients of the same exact scenario. You would see super red, the beginning, red planet, that's where it came from. And then you started seeing a shift into what looked like just kind of like a barren wasteland, but not so red. And then also some people, they've been able to take off the filters that NASA has brought and been able to see Mars more like it is.
Yes.
And from some of the images of telescopes, it looks kind of reddish, but not as red as they've showed it to us. So what do you feel about what they have been showing? Do you think that that's been manipulated in some way? What do you think it looks like, really?
Right. Tomorrow I'll show you everyone a photo of Mars with a blue sky. And that's
an atmosphere, right?
That's the atmosphere.
Well, it's supposed to have no atmosphere.
And not only that, sometimes the sky is slightly red, sometimes grey, but to see a blue sky on Mars is amazing, and that's because the colours were adjusted for correct human vision, because machine vision is slightly different, and the way they colour it goes into the spectroscope. But interestingly, even when the Viking landers went to Mars in 1976, they had technicians going around adjusting the colour on the screens that the scientists were using to try and make it look more red, because they wanted to give the concept that everything on Mars is red. Sure, the surface is red because it's rusted. Well, rust is iron oxide. You can't have iron oxide without oxygen and water.
Wow.
So at least that's there for sure.
Very interesting.
That's why it looks red. And from Earth, you look in the sky, sure, Mars looks red, because it is reddish in colour. Its surface is red. But today, there is no oxygen in it, and there's no flowing water. But there is ample evidence of a vast amount of water beneath the surface. Still. Mm-hmm. And many scientists who have done the calculations say there is probably permafrost no more than a kilometre beneath the surface of Mars, and a vast buried ocean which is now ice because it's so cold. And that water may have been on the surface with oceans and lakes and rivers and rainfall and so forth.
Right, right. So, last question on Mars. We're going to move on to other topics, but I'm curious, now we're getting into the speculative. You know, what you feel on this level. Do you feel that Mars, because there's some ancient stories, including the Anunnaki Sumerian stories, that kind of say that our ancestors came from Mars and that we did something to that planet. Maybe there was war. Some people even say, channelers, hypnotherapists, say there was nuclear war and fallout, ripped the atmosphere, and then our descendants, ancestors came from that planet to our planet. Have you ever done research on what that actual story could be?
Yes, and I think the way to see the true history of our solar system is to read the Akashic records of not the individuals, but the planetary systems as a whole. And if you do that and go back in time, many millions of years ago, there was another planet in this solar system that had an orbit between Mars and Jupiter. Yeah. That is today the asteroid belt. And that was the planet that we destroyed, Maldek. We destroyed. And according to the law of karma and rebirth, we had to be reborn somewhere. And we came to this planet from Maldek. That's the true story in the Akashic records. And so when we arrived on this planet, there was already a civilization on this planet, but they gave way to us. because we were the hapless fallen children of this solar system that destroyed the planet.
Right.
That's possibly the worst cosmic crime one can think of.
Yeah.
As to how that happened is another story.
And how's that connected to Mars?
Well, eventually we came here, but we built two civilizations on this earth. There's Lemuria, otherwise known as Mu, and Atlantis, which we destroyed. So to have made the same mistake 3 times in a row is uncannily unbelievable. How can a race of humans do something like that? And it was after the Atlantis that we had the connection with Mars, because the other planets in the solar system already had highly refined cultures in the solar system, and not at the same physical level as we are at.
So they could still be there, but in a different dimension.
They're still there, but at higher planes.
Yeah.
And I use the word plane rather than dimension, because we already live in 7 dimensions.
Yeah,
I don't know if you knew that.
Yeah, the trackers is each dimension, right?
And because we already live in 7 dimensions, it's wrong to say that we're moving into a new dimension or that we're moving into the 4th dimension. We're already in a 7-dimensional world.
Yeah.
Therefore, I use the word planes to separate the physical realm from the other planes. Now, you've studied the esoteric Eastern religions. You know that in many esoteric religions there is a concept of many different planes on this earth. And indeed, there is. We're on the physical plane. You and I are now sat on a physical plane, talking to each other with physical bodies that are looking at each other. But there are other planes in around this earth which are kind of different levels of vibratory frequencies, and they blend into each other. And according to the esoteric schools, there's 7 planes of life on this earth.
Beautiful. All right, so moving on now, I want to show this next book here. We're going to talk about this. And we'll see if we can get through all of these here. And where is the first one I want to talk about? The Vimana book. Okay, this one. So, massive Vimana UFO over the atomic weapons establishment. And this is about Vimanas in general as well, right?
Yes.
So, go ahead,
It contains a detailed report of my own sighting, as well as a detailed report of a sighting, a massive UFO that was seen over the atomic weapons establishment, which is in England. And it's what's known as Aldermaston in general terms. But that's where
what year was this?
This was in 2004, around the same time that the USS Nimitz encounters took place off the California coast. So that's another interesting point. Now the Atomic Weapons Research Establishment does research on atomic weapons. We have atomic weapons. The United States has atomic weapons. So does China and Russia and India and Pakistan and many people say Israel has nuclear weapons. So they do research on these weapons. Terrible things to think about because they're really weapons of mass destruction, and we hold them. So this is a place where a massive UFO was seen one Saturday morning, hovering over the Aldermaston site by a couple who were driving down that road at 6:30 in the morning, very quiet time. And they were astonished at what they saw. And the witness, the gentleman, he got out of his van to have a better look at it, and there's no other cars coming down the road, but there are houses nearby, so he tooted his horn to see if he could wake people up. But at 6:30 people on a Saturday morning probably are not up. No one else came to look at it, but he and his wife had a very careful observation. So my book is about that sighting in particular, a detailed study, and what happened when I wrote to the security head at Aldermaston. They wouldn't reply to me. So what I did then was to write to my local MP, the Member of Parliament, who then wrote to Aldermaston and got a reply, because by law, they have to reply to the Member of Parliament. So I published the letter I received from both my Member of Parliament and the letter he received from Aldermaston about that UFO sighting. A very interesting letter.
What was it?
We have no incontrovertible evidence for extraterrestrial
We have
life.
what? No.
We have no evidence for extraterrestrial life.
Yeah, but even a UFO, you can say that you can see a UFO and be like, well, it's definitely no evidence because I don't know who's driving it, but it's definitely something
Exactly. Yeah. So in one sense, if people observe a UFO, it is evidence of something.
Yeah.
What it is, we don't know exactly.
Exactly.
We have to discover the origins of these objects, where they're
Yeah.
coming from, why are they here. When I had my own sighting, that was one of the paramount questions that came to my mind.
Yeah.
Was, where are you coming from? What are you doing here at this moment in time? This was way back in the summer of 1964. There's a very detailed report in this book, in that
Right.
book.
Well, it's so interesting because it's all semantics when it comes to the word extraterrestrial, when it comes to non-human intelligence, right? So it's like, for example, some letters have been sent to the DoD, Department of Defense, saying that, do you have any evidence or have you dissected or had any extraterrestrial bodies? And then they have a different term now for extraterrestrial non-human intelligence. So technically they could say no,
Yes.
because it's a different term.
Yeah.
And that's the same thing with multiple other, the other ones escape me right now.
Semantics is used that way quite a
Yeah,
lot to
exactly.
to cover. See, if you think about a cover-up, there's two ways to maintain a cover-up.
Mm-hmm.
One is to keep silence. The other one is to put a rug over it, the evidence that you have. Yeah. But eventually, that eggshell of a cover-up has to crack, and it's now cracked to a great degree.
Right, yeah, 100%.
And we're waiting for Senate hearings next year.
Yeah, in the
They
US
might-
or over
in
here?
the US,
Yeah.
in the US.
Mhm.
They might not happen. We don't know yet.
Yeah.
It depends on whether that thing gets through the Senate or not.
The whistleblower one.
Yeah, to have more whistleblowers come forward.
Yeah, give
We
it
had three
protection.
whistleblowers last year.
Yeah,
You know, Captain David Fravor and Ryan Graves,
right.
and David
David
Bush
Bush,
came
yeah.
forward. Yeah.
hmm So this is a good segue into a topic something that I hear a lot from congressional members now, from Lou Elizondo a lot in his new book, and from other people in this field, including David Grush, is literally the topic of this book, which is them showing up at nuclear bases, right? So if you do a search of, go to ChatGPT even and be like, give me the top 20 UFO sightings,
Yeah.
and then you research where all these sightings were, 20 out of 20, if not 19 out of 20, nuclear bases or nuclear, even the USS Nimitz was a nuclear,
Powered.
powered thing,
Yeah.
right? Which is interesting because it wasn't a weapon, it was powered by nuclear
Yes.
energy.
Yes.
And the reason why the military is behind all of this is because they're showing up at the military bases. They're
Yeah.
curious about it.
That's been going on since 1946, by the way.
Exactly, which is where I'm going to. So I'd love for you to speak about that. Let's give them the answer, because I think from your research and I think you got to delve in both worlds, the esoteric metaphysical world and the mainstream world, to really bridge the gap of what is actually going on with this nuclear question here.
Yes, without a doubt, there's something like over 500 sightings at nuclear sites around the Earth, all around the world.
Yeah.
Wherever there's nuclear ballistic missile sites or nuclear research areas or even uranium mines, you will see unidentified anomalous phenomena.
Yeah. And why?
That's a question, a very good question, and the most obvious answer is they're interested in our nuclear capabilities.
Mm-hmm.
I believe they do not want us to destroy our planet, number
Yeah.
one. They do not want us to destroy all life on this earth, and they possibly don't want us to take our nuclear weapons out into space.
Yeah.
That might be a no-no. See, the whole of nature, the whole of this galaxy, I believe, is governed by law, cosmic law. Just like we have our laws, and the laws on Earth are different in different countries, but above all of that is a cosmic law, a single cosmic law. And I'll spell out the name for that law, K-A-R-M-A. And it's all done according to that law. Now, our scientists, unfortunately, do not understand that law as yet. So there is a problem there. But with them observing us and keeping an eye on our nuclear installations, raises two possibilities, two suggestions here. One is, would they intervene if you were to have nuclear war? I believe they don't want us to have nuclear war. They don't want us to destroy the planet. They do not want us to destroy life on this beautiful, beautiful planet and the beautiful life forms we have on this planet, not just the humanoid life forms. So that's one thing. And the other thing is, are they likely to intervene if we have nuclear war? The answer to this question is it depends. It depends whether we're going to damage the Earth to such a degree that intervention would be necessary. That's the question.
Yeah.
So them monitoring our nuclear sites is fully understandable.
Yeah.
Because they're the most powerful weapons of mass destruction that we have.
Right. And they say, like, you know, these whistleblowers and Congress people, that, okay, they're showing up nuclear bases, so since the way it works, unfortunately, is that if they don't know what it is, they have to immediately consider it a threat. Until it's like guilty until proven innocent, even though it should be the other way around. But they also say in the next vein, they say, oh, well, we have evidence that they've been visiting us for hundreds of years. And then in the next vein, they say, is it China or Russia? Well, where was China and Russia 200 years ago when we had that at the sighting?
We were all in the same caveman stage.
Right. Exactly. So I think the answers are there for them. They just don't want to look into it.
I'm also a representative on ISA, the International Coalition for Extraterrestrial Research. And we had Lou Elizondo on one occasion.
Yeah.
And I asked him the question, why is it that you use the word threat? The military.
Okay.
So his answer was interesting. He said, supposing you lock your house doors at night, front door, windows all locked, get up in the morning and you find footprints in the house.
I heard this one from him,
that's his normal answer to that question.
Right.
Would you consider that a threat, that someone had come into your house in the night? Nothing is missing, nothing is broken, your money's still there, your belongings are still there, but there are footprints.
Yeah.
What do you think that? Then, is that a threat or not?
Yeah.
So from a military point of view, a military thinking, then it's a threat.
Right.
But if it's a threat, how long has it been a threat for? Just since 1946? Or for the past 5 millennia? Or maybe 10,000 years? Or maybe 1 million years? We don't know. Because in one sense, our science doesn't know a single thing about a single extraterrestrial race. But they may have been visiting us for millions of years because they're likely to be 500 million years ahead of us. Maybe 1 million years ahead, maybe 500,000 years in science.
Even as some people say, even if they're 100 years ahead, where we're going to be in 100 years is so far beyond right now.
Well, let's go backwards. Let's go backwards to 200 years ago. We had nothing that could be construed as an unidentified flying object.
Right. You know, to Lou's point there, I would say, what if you had Alzheimer's and maybe you were in the wrong house? You didn't know it was your house, because how are we to know that this is our house? Maybe he also says that there's species that we're finding in the depths of the ocean that we just discovered last year.
Indeed.
And we're realizing that this universe and on our planet is so much more.
Indeed, we have flora and fauna and fungi.
Yeah, fungi was a recent discovery.
But there's lichens as well, and there's more mass in that than flora and fauna. So we're the minority of life on this.
And fungi is like the number one thing inside of our body too.
Tomorrow I will show you photographs of fungi taken on Mars. Would you like to see those?
Yeah, I'd love to see that. Yeah, beautiful. This book here is Something Strange on the Lunar Surface, and all these books are on Amazon, right?
And I've brought a few with me.
Yeah, okay, beautiful. So, I mean, the moon.
Our closest interplanetary neighbor, in a sense.
Too many anomalies to even start,
Yeah.
So go for it.
This book is about a particular anomaly on the far side of the moon.
Okay.
Now, we can't see the far side of the moon because it's tidally locked with Earth in such a way that it rotates at the same time as it revolves around Earth. So we only see one side of the moon's face.
Yeah.
Now, the only way to see the far side of the moon is to go around it in a spacecraft, which is exactly what the Apollo astronauts did.
Yeah.
And some years ago, I came across a photo on the internet, and I asked my colleagues at the LunaScan project, and they said, oh, it's probably a hoax. So I looked at that photo and I thought it didn't look like a hoax. So I started searching through the Apollo archives. And lo and behold, the Apollo 15 astronauts had taken that particular photograph. And then I did further searching and I discovered that there's 7 other photos taken by the Apollo 15 astronauts of those particular objects on the far side of the moon. So now I knew I had the coordinates. So I went back to my friends at Lunarscan and said, are there any new photographs taken by the recent Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter of this location? And they said, yeah, send us the coordinates, and I did. They said, wow, look at this. Here's a close-up photo of these same objects that the Apollo 15 astronauts had photographed.
Wow.
So we now have this photographed in my book, and it's also part of this book, because in the book I give full details, all the frame numbers of the photos that you can find in the NASA archives from the Apollo 15 astronauts, as well as the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter photos from 2010 onwards. They've taken 10 photos of this area, or at least they've released 10 photos of this area. High resolution photos of these objects in that area.
Right.
They're in a crater called Paracelsus C.
Okay.
And all the craters on the moon have been given names based on people on Earth. And Paracelsus was the alchemist of old, as you may remember. So there's several craters in that far side of the moon named after Paracelsus. And this particular crater is Paracelsus C.
Okay.
So together with some of my colleagues, we wrote up a technical paper and had it published in the Journal of Space Exploration.
Okay.
So it's out there now.
And this was about the anomaly inside that crater?
Inside that crater.
Very
yes,
interesting.
yes. It's a deep crater. So it's a crater you don't want to fall into because you won't get out again. So the only way to go investigate is to send either a rover in there or some kind of device like a balloon or something like that, or a little helicopter to go and take more close-up photos of these very interesting objects. One looks like a wall, the other one looks like a building, and they're close to each other. And the one that looks like a wall could well have been the monolith that was used by Arthur C. Clarke in his story 2001: The Space Odyssey.
Yeah.
If you remember, there's
the
discovery of a monolith.
Yeah, yeah.
That was the main theme of that film.
And wasn't there a follow-up to that movie where that was all centered around a monolith and the follow-up as well?
And the connection to the planet Saturn.
Yeah.
Which I won't go into.
Which is Saturn's one of my favorite topics, so we're
going to high-level metaphysics then if you bring Saturn into it.
Next time we'll do that one.
We can do that for sure.
So, and then just to get off on the topic of monoliths right now, there's a monolith on Phobos.
Yes.
Right? And you can look up Phobos, that's Jupiter's moon, right?
No, Phobos is one of Mars' moons.
One of Mars' moons, yeah. You can look it up online, monolith on Phobos, and you'll see actual satellite images where this thing is just
sticking out of the surface.
Right.
And it was mentioned by the second man to walk on the moon.
Yeah.
Buzz Aldrin.
And then, speak about Buzz Aldrin, because that's where I wanted to go as well, because he said some really weird, strange things about the moon, and I feel a lot of the individuals that went to the moon said even when Neil Armstrong and his crew came back, it was just the way that they were so somber afterwards. It's almost like they saw something. Leaked audio tapes came out, right? All of that.
They were not allowed to talk about it.
Right.
Yeah. That would have depressed them beyond belief, because this is supposed to be humans landing on our satellite, the moon, and they were not allowed to talk about what they had discovered.
Yeah.
So that knowledge was put under a rug as well.
Right.
I believe.
Well, it's so interesting. It's now getting kind of esoteric here with the moon. Like all the anomalies, for example, the fact that it's in relation to our planet, it's a massive satellite compared to any other planet. Right. And out of the billions of places it could be, it's perfectly done for a solar eclipse, right? Like it could have been 2 inches, like kind of simplifying it, 2 inches further, 2 inches closer. Yeah. It's perfectly there, right?
Yeah, that's because both the sun and the moon subtend an angle of 1/2 degree.
Yeah.
Is that coincidence? We don't know.
It's 1 in a trillion chance.
It's amazing that the moon is at that distance where it subtends 1/2 degree to our eyesight.
Yes.
And the sun subtends the same angle of 1/2 degree. That's why you can have a total eclipse of the moon.
And ancient civilizations, some of them talk about the time before the moon.
They do indeed. Yes. So this raises interesting questions. Is the moon a natural satellite?
Yeah.
Or was it something that was manufactured
and
brought into orbit of this Earth and placed around Earth for our benefit.
Yeah.
Because there's subtle influences from the moon. You understand that the lunatic asylum word comes from the name Luna.
Yeah.
Because people observe that on a full moon, some people express what you could call lunatic imbalances. Yeah. So there's that as well.
Yeah.
So there are very subtle effects from the moon on life on Earth. Indeed, there would be no life on Earth today if the tides that are raised by the moon didn't create, help life in the oceans.
Right.
And without life in the oceans, there'd be no life on land either.
Yes. I just was watching a podcast the other day, and over 50% of the Earth's oxygen actually comes from the ocean. Right?
Yes.
And the way it comes out is through the crashing of tides on the coast. So if the moon wasn't there would be no tides and waves crashing the coast, therefore not releasing over 50% of the oxygen, creating a planet where we don't have the right oxygen level for us to exist.
This raises another interesting question. How is it that our planet, Mother Earth, maintains this balance of the atmosphere so that we can breathe it?
Right.
You only need a slight imbalance in order for us to die.
Exactly.
Imagine what happened in Bhopal in India many decades ago, when there's a release from a chemical plant poisoned the air.
Mm-hmm.
So there was an imbalance of the atmosphere. So people started breathing in not the normal mixture of hydrogen and oxygen and carbon dioxide, but something totally different. It killed thousands of people, as you know.
Right.
So how is it that the Earth maintains this balance in the atmosphere? That's another intriguing question, which is also esoteric in its answer.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Even like the same podcast I was watching, the moon and the sun they both have a role in also the evaporation rate of water, and the evaporation rate is perfect so that the oceans don't, because the rivers all flow into the oceans. Indeed. Right? So the evaporation rate is perfect that the oceans never overrun with water, and the oceans never push back through the rivers, that it's always a constant perfect evaporation rate around the world for everything to be reabsorbed in the atmosphere, put into the rivers and back in the ocean, that we don't have flooding on that level. So it's like that perfect harmony kind of goes towards grand design on some level.
But that's changing slightly.
It is.
And that's the reason we're having so much flooding.
Yeah.
Flooding
but that's also solar systematic changes, right? Climate changes within the galaxy, not just Earth.
But just let's stick with the solar system.
Yeah.
If we go too far out, then it becomes more difficult.
Mm-hmm.
But that's why I say let's study the Moon and the Mars for evidence of extraterrestrial intervention.
Yeah.
And if we find that, then we can say for definite our solar system had a history.
Yeah.
And a history of humanoid life. And that's key as well. We're humanoids, and we react to each other as humanoids. Of course, we have animals kingdom as well. And what is the difference between the animal kingdom and the humanoid life on this earth? If we think about it carefully, it's levels of consciousness. Not the fact that they have hearts, and they have to eat and drink like us, and they need places of rest, and they have a circulatory system just like we have. So physiologically, they're not very different from us. And yet, at a consciousness level, we're different from all the animals on this earth.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the difference in levels of consciousness, which is where the Buddhist concept of the three spheres of existence, which is essentially what the Buddha said, is that there are many different levels of consciousness in this universe.
Yeah. And then the Buddhists, in your other book, Other Worlds in Buddhism, the Buddhists speak about that. Is it the Buddhist philosophy after Buddha? Because, I know about Buddhist teachings that were really based on meditation and just the simple liberation from suffering. But did he come forward with some information about other worlds?
And in my book, I've quoted chapter and verse from the Buddhist text. Which is where the Buddha's teachings were eventually written down.
Okay.
Initially they were passed on orally, because in those days we didn't have writing.
Mm-hmm.
So after the Buddha's passing, the monks, 700 monks, memorized every verse of his teachings, and these were passed on accurately down through the decades, until the first Buddhist writings, which are about 80 years BC, before the Common Era. And then at around 500 AD, and there were vast amounts of Buddhist writings. Indeed, if you put all those books together, there are about 13 times the size of the Old and New Testament put together, those Buddhist writings. So the Buddha actually spoke about other worlds. And what I've done is, in my book, Other Worlds in Buddhism, I've gone into the actual verses, quoting you chapter and verse, so any researcher can go back and look at the Buddhist text and say, oh yeah, he did say that in this text, and he did say that in this text, and he talked about thousandfold world systems.
Thousandfold, interesting.
And the many different levels of consciousness within 3 spheres of existence. They're very complex.
So
the universe is much more complex than we realize.
Yeah. Wow. No, it makes sense, because through his meditation, through going to his subconscious and his past lives, through exploring the kalapas, the subatomic particles within his body, he has a whole book on his own past incarnations that he remembered.
Yes.
So, and after you do the Vipassana technique to liberate yourself from this life, you then go visit all the other realities and worlds.
Yes, he did say that he remembered many of his lives, and I quote that verse as well in my book.
Yeah, beautiful.
Yes, so the books I've written: Something Strange on the Lunar Surface, Massive Vimana over the Atomic Weapons Establishment, Other Worlds in Buddhism, and then The Mystery on Mars, the mound configuration on Mars.
Yeah.
This is an absolutely precise configuration of 6 mounds that were analysed by the late Professor Horace, Dr. Crater.
Right.
And I wrote that book because people are not understanding it. They say, oh, maths, we can't deal with maths. It's not maths, it's simple geometry.
Yeah.
If anyone is interested in sacred geometry on Earth, they will now become interested in sacred geometry on Mars. Yeah. Because that's what it is.
And when you see that type of precision, you have to wonder what happened.
Did it happen by chance?
Yeah.
So that's something he looked into as well.
Okay.
Because his peers said, this may be chance.
Yeah.
How do you get a chance formation of a pattern like that?
Right.
It's like saying the pyramids in Giza just happened naturally.
Yeah.
It was chance that placed those 3 pyramids the way they were. Well, we know that they're not. Right. But that's because we have some historical record, and we know that the pyramids on Earth were built by maybe humanoids, or on Earth, maybe Egyptians, or maybe a pre-Egyptian civilization. We don't really know the true date of the pyramids. Yeah. Not the real true date of the pyramids.
But it's definitely some type of advanced awareness. Technology, we don't know. It's definitely some sort of technology. It could be a consciousness technology, but it's definitely some level of advanced awareness that mainstream tries to think that we are giving almost them too much credit for what they've created, and that we can recreate what they have. But if you look at all the anomalies and list them all, there's hundreds of them when it comes to Egypt, and to check every single one of them off, like we can actually do that now, including the resonance in the structures, it's very challenging.
Once I challenged a mainstream scientist, whose name I won't mention, just to rebuild the Giza pyramid.
Yeah.
Initially he said, oh, that's going to be easy.
Yeah.
Then he looked into everything that's needed.
Yeah.
Not just the engineering skills, to the architecture, and how you're going to move stones and put them in place with such precision. And he eventually decided that maybe our today's technology could not do that.
Yeah. And even with the technology, the universal concepts and the measurements connected to the planet on Earth, circumference of the Earth, the distance to other stars, all those equations and numbers are embedded in there. So they had an astronomical awareness of where Sirius B was. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, the Orion Belt.
Right, Orion Belt
is supposed to represent where the 3 pyramids.
Right.
At least those 3 main pyramids.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so it's amazing. I mean, the rabbit hole goes so deep. Just when we start, and which we know they have gone to Mars and they have discovered this information, it's not like we need to continue to just imagine if that's possible. The secrets are just behind one closed door here on planet Earth. and pretty soon, as you know, we're getting to a point where we're tipping the scales. And when this comes out, it's going to be a floodgate of information.
Yes, and we need to examine that information very carefully and sift out possibly bad information from the good information. That's something that I'm doing. By the books I've written, I'm saying, let's be critical, let's think carefully, let's think logically, let's not jump to conclusions, let's keep some of our emotions out of this, and in one sense, look at it in a cold mathematical way, because maths is supposed to be the basis of science. Then if something is proven mathematically, like the mound configuration on Mars, then it's scientifically proven.
And then bring in the emotions.
After that comes the emotions.
It's like don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, because there's one thing that looks like it can't be the case, doesn't mean you throw everything else out because you're like, oh, this person was.
But it's got to be controlled emotion.
You
can't run amok.
Yeah, that's so funny. Controlled emotion. So that's the masculine and feminine coming in at the same time, right there.
You know, in the 1950s, I used to, because of my interest in the subject of UFOs, as a result of my personal sighting, I used to follow what was happening in America, and of course the U.S. Air Force would issue a statement every year. We can explain most UFO sightings, maybe not 3%, maybe not 5%. Maybe we could explain all of them if we had more information, but we don't have. So these are the way they cook the books, carefully. And in each statement they would say, we do not have we do not have proof for extraterrestrial life. They were very careful how they worded it.
Right. Semantics again, because unless an extraterrestrial comes up to your front door and knocks on the door, that's what they will consider proof. But really, we do have proof, obviously, there's something happening that we don't know.
But that sort of proof is personal, you see? If it happened to you, as it has happened to me, it's personal proof. But how do you then convince the rest of the world? Because at the moment it's been very localized and personal. Although we've had UFO sightings seen by masses of people, over stadiums and in open places, and Phoenix, Arizona, and so forth, where hundreds of people have seen the same objects flying over. So, but maybe we're waiting for that step when a flying saucer, in inverted commas, were to land on Earth in a very prominent place. Now, I'm not suggesting Buckingham Palace. I'm not suggesting the White House. Why not? Because they're both denied the existence of extraterrestrial life. I'll go to a country, a place which has not denied the existence of extraterrestrial life.
Chile was one of them.
Chile could be one. So,
amazing.
all in all, we're on the verge of a thought renaissance. Our whole attitude, from a world point of view, from not just the ultimately it's got to affect the politics. Initially it's got to affect science and religion. The religions will also have to revise some of their teachings and change in according with the findings of science. That's important.
Yes.
Because, so there's politics, there's science, there's religion. In a sense, all three are searching for truth. And I would put politics at the bottom, because that's important. Who's going to fix our potholes? Who's going to collect my rubbish at the end every week? That's down to local politics, and you can't have local politics without national politics. And then when you have national politics, you have world politics. So there's a very complex system we have. But then there's science, which expresses doubt. It simply brushes things aside and says, no, we must only deal with the material world. But that's not true science. True science will deal with the material world and the levels of consciousness. That's how we have to combine our true knowledge. And then religion sitting above that. So I go religion, science, politics. Then eventually religions, on the basis of what has been proven by science, will have to adapt their teachings. Or else those religions will fade away.
Right. That's the way the institutions are going to be shifting, and that's why there's a lot of fight for control because of these belief systems that people have. Beautiful. Ananda, thank you so much, brother. I appreciate you very much.